All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the branding panel, part of our senior capstone series of panels on design. Today we have Bailey, Jesse, and Jason who are here to present their capstone projects. If you have questions or comments as the presentations go along, please feel free to put them into the comments for this feed if you're watching live. We'll have each of the students present their capstone projects, and then after everyone has presented, we'll have a Q&A session that I moderate. So please, as this goes along, feel free to add comments. And with that, let's get started. So Bailey, if you want to share your screen, and Jesse and Jason and I will turn off our videos. So whenever you're ready, Bailey, take it away.
I want to find this button real quick. Sorry. Okay, I might be silly, but is there a way to share in preview other than this? I don't even know. Because I haven't downloaded. Oh, there it is. Never mind. Sorry. My bad. Okay.
Did you get it?
Yes, I'm so sorry. Okay, here we go.
Oh, great. Yep.
Okay, so I am Bailey Balmer. I am a senior, clearly, but I'm a senior in graphic design and advertising. So one thing that always pointed out to me is in advertising, you learn a lot about PR and PR kits and stuff like that. So when I was trying to think of a capstone project, I couldn't really think of what to do exactly. So I thought of things that I was passionate about. One thing I'm really passionate about is endangered species. And this is something I'm passionate about just because in my family, we always care about animals and stuff like that. And so I've kind of like gained that love of animals through my parents. And then I wanted to do something that would kind of like make a change, but I was kind of like, how do I do that rather than just doing stuff that I've done before? So my overview of what my project was and why I thought of what I did. So endangered species is anything considered a very high risk of extinction in the wild. And this includes like coral reefs, insects, trees, land mammals, water mammals, fungi, and but most of endangered species are considered up of 25% of mammals, with amphibians and trees are second. So one thing that I really looked into was the Endangered Species Act. And so why do people not care about endangered species that much? So we always hear about it in school and stuff, like you always learn about animals in school, but you never really like talk about it when you get older. And this is one thing I really wanted to focus on. And so I asked people this, like, why don't you think you hear about it enough? Like, what would make you care more and stuff like that? And a lot of the things that I've heard from people is like, they didn't just want to give their money to something. They'd rather go do something for it instead. They didn't really like bring awareness to it enough, or people would just think that it was negative all the time. So one thing that really sparked my interest was the Endangered Species Act. So this kind of like sparked my curiosity and like exploring this topic more. So basically this is an act that it is recovery plans for habitats, and it has a 90% recovery rate for this. But ever since Trump came into office, well, back when he was, it became under threat. So this is why I wanted to bring awareness to it again. Okay, so sketching, I had a really hard time. I had no clue what to do with the name because I didn't want it to be too obvious, like, hey, here is like my brand, all this stuff. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do yet. So I kind of went back and forth with the name. I kind of went with Void, but it just didn't have that animal impact that I wanted. So this was my first logo that I made, and I got a lot of good feedback about it, saying like experience with colors, experiment with different text, experiment with different names too. And so I experimented a little bit more. There's a long list of names that I had there, some quick logos that I made too. And I kind of like took out letters. That was a recommendation by one of the students too. And I was kind of like having a hard time of like, is it too hard to read? Is it too easy to read? Like, which one is it? Like, do you get what I'm trying to get across? And so basically what my brand is overall is what I decided on is ever since I was 16 years old, I've worked at Buffalo Wild Wings. So I've always grown up in kind of like a sports bar industry. And so I love the bar, which kind of sounds weird, but I love like mixing drinks, bartending, stuff like that. But I also love animals. So one thing that me and Alex talked about is he kind of brought up this idea of like, well, why don't you do something like a bar event or like a bar package that like people would buy or people would donate to like have an event or a fundraiser for endangered species. So that's what I decided to do. So here's the final logo I made. I kind of took a lion, or it was a tiger, but it could be a lion too. But I kind of traced the outline of it and then combined the letters together to make it a little bit better. So the word is just endangered, but it kind of looks different because I took out some of the letters, so it's not like as obvious, I guess. Some of the colors I chose, I tried to stick with bright, vibrant colors. Once I started playing around with colors like people suggested, I ended up really liking it. Animals are colorful, so that was really easy to stick with. I stuck with the orange though the most is because it's like caution, stop. It makes you stop and think. So like when you see caution tape, it's kind of yellowy orange and it makes you stop and really think about things. So some of the branding materials I have is like what you would see in it. I wanted to keep everything pretty clean, simple, so that when you do take this to a bar, it'll fit like any type of atmosphere. So if the bar is very modern, it'd fit that. If the bar was very just local, it would fit that brand as well. So that's kind of why I went with the more simplistic version. So some of the materials I made for my project are, so this would be the package that you would get, and there'd be like 3 different packages. So you could either get like the tiger, you could get the leopard, or you could get the giraffe. So each of these would be like a different price package, and it would come with different things. Like the tiger could be like the platinum one or the premium one, and then like the giraffe would be like the bronze one. So you would buy a different one, whatever fundraiser you wanted to do for your fundraiser. My bad. So I have a couple drink menus. This would be like a handout menu. This would be like a paper menu. So this one could just give to people to throw away. It has the ingredients. I promise the light text on there shows up better on the screen. But so this would just be like a quick one that you could look at quick to order your drinks. So the drinks are all inspired by animals, and each of the drinks as well kind of like correlate to the animal in some way. I just tried not to pick like random drinks. So I have a table menu book that would sit at the table. So when you go to bar service, like, or bottle service at like more popular bars in big cities, they'll have a drink menu there that you'll pick your bottle from. So this is kind of where I got this inspiration from. So you could be able to see the drinks there and the ingredients and what you're getting. And then even if you want at the end, you could sell these books later on as recipes, because they do have the amounts of each recipe or each ingredient that you would put in there in each. And I wanted to put the picture on there of the animal as well too, just so it doesn't disassociate the drinks and the animals together. So some other things like bring awareness, because, okay, we're talking about animals, yes, but why does it matter? So some things that would be around the restaurant is table tents. So these table tents would give facts on like the polar bears, the leopards, any of the animals that are there, and give you the population. So like the leopard only has around 84, and like the polar bear has around 22,000, but yet these are still habitats that are getting taken away every single day. So, and then another things that would come in the packages is like glasses. So you have the choice between, that's a typo, not black and white. These are the colored glasses, and these next ones would be like your black and white glasses. So you have your martini glasses, your short glasses, your tall glasses, and then some bar napkins as well. So how can you help now, instead of, since I just talked about this, you can educate yourself on endangered species and what you can really do. You can visit a conservation zoo. You can make your home wildlife friendly, like locking your trash, making sure you rip apart all those like pop rings. Don't purchase products made from endangered species, like anything with ivory or anything like that. Recycling and using sustainable products to protect the environment. And here's some websites that you can go on to figure out more or learn more and donate. So thank you for listening to my capstone, and I hope you learned a little bit more about endangered species.
All right, awesome. Great work, Bailey. Thanks so much. All right, so next up is Jesse. So Jesse, if you want to turn your camera on, you should be able to share your screen.
Yes, 1 second. Is it showing up?
We see the slides. We don't see it in like full screen.
Perfect. Now
there it is. Yep.
All right.
Perfect.
So I'm Jesse. My capstone is called Neutral. I want to start with a little video I made before kind of going into it, just to kind of give you a sense of what it is a little bit. All right. So essentially what it is a beauty brand focused mainly on nail polish, at least right now. So neutral is kind of representative of like it being gender neutral. It's supposed to be all inclusive, as opposed to what you see often where it's just kind of advertised towards women. This is going to be advertised towards everyone or branded towards everyone. So with that being said, here is my brand manual that I created. The color scheme and everything that went into it, the typefaces that were chosen, is all supposed to be, it's not super in your face. It's not super colorful. I wanted it to be neutral. That's kind of the point, kind of carrying that into the name, into the type even. So you have your sans serif, your serif, kind of both. You have both sides of the type spectrum. And the logo is kind of like this. It kind of creates this box. And then you have this layer over the top of it that kind of expands outside of the box as if to, I guess, expand your mind, expand your opinion on what would be your typical beauty product. And it also, as I was told by other classmates, kind of does look like a top coat when you're applying nail polish. And then from there, I created this packaging, and I wanted just to carry all these things. I wanted it to be simple. I didn't want it to be too much. For this, like when you do shop for nail polish and you see them on a shelf, they're usually not in a package. They're just simply the bottle. So as far as like shelf presence goes, if you're in a nail polish section and you just see a row of just black boxes, to me, I think that would kind of pique your interest as to what it is. I did make one change to this box once I actually made them, and that will be shown later on. And then these are just kind of simple business cards that I had made just to, promote the brand. And then when you switch over to digital, this is the like Instagram page I have for it. I do plan on selling the product. I have made it. I have a few different colors, and I do plan on like actually launching sometime this May. And so here's kind of a sneak at what the website would be. And I'm going to transfer over to the website prototype and walk you through that. So this would be just when you land on the web. This is just a landing page. What this represents, it would be like a feed of like people using the product. So like this would be like a live feed of hashtags, whether you use them on Instagram or Twitter or whatever it may be. And obviously they have these, the colors that would be our colors, and each color is clickable. So the color that they're wearing will lead you to the shop, like its specific color within the shop. So we have, these are the colors that I have right now. So if we go back to the home page and say we click on this, it will take you to the bottle that is used within the photo. And then you can add that to your cart. And then, or you could just click buy now. It'll take you to a checkout page. You can confirm your purchase. And it'll give you a little thank you, and you're on your way. And then it takes you right back to the landing page. And then from there, I did a series of like print posters. These are kind of, the idea with this was kind of show the nails in a situation that's kind of role reverse gender wise, at least stereotypically, to kind of just push against that, I guess, the stereotype, that narrative that's been created. So this one, it's like chopping wood, a fighter, fixing a car, and then baking. And then next will be the actual product. So these are some of the actual colors I have. I have about 24. But the change I made with the box that's not in the original design is I cut a little hole in it. So you get a little sneak peek of what the color is. But in order to really see it, you do have to then pick up the box, which is kind of like my idea of like psychologically, holding something makes you want it a little bit more. So you get a little window of a preview of what the color is, but you actually have to kind of pick it up to really truly see what it ends up being. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Great work, Jesse. Awesome to see that come together so well. Okay. So as we're transitioning now to Jason, for anybody who's watching live, there's some great comments and questions showing up in the comment section for the video. So please keep putting questions, keep putting feedback in there, and then we'll filter them into the conversation after Jason has presented. So Jason, if you're ready, share your screen and take it away.
All right. I have created a video presentation for you guys about my capstone, so I will go ahead and play that for you. Hi, I'm Jason Mui, and this is my capstone project. For my capstone project, I created a brand that revolves around social media content for a professional football team. In this project, I took photos from Iowa State Cyclones' past seasons and repurposed them to be used as content for my made-up football team. I decided to focus on a social media branding campaign because of its growing importance in the world of sports. Professional sports teams are now investing heavily in their creative teams to develop a strong social media presence that can boost engagement and excitement for the team. I wanted this project to show my capabilities of creating content that matches up to the standards of a fast-growing industry. The team that I will be creating content for is the Iowa Wolves. Before starting the creation phase of the project, I began researching more about the impact of sports design and why it has seen significant growth. Someone who can personally speak about the explosion of sports design is the creative director for Iowa State Athletics, Jackson Price. Prior to his 3 years at Iowa State, Jackson has had 30 years of experience in design with positions in ad agencies, a global financial firm, design studios, and more. Jackson attributes the growth of sports teams and organizations developing their brand to proper storytelling and fan engagement, saying that brand recognition grows exponentially with good storytelling. Here is a snippet from the interview from Jackson. Now you see a combination of design and social media being used in sports design because of the power to engage fans, build hype, recruit talent, and ultimately make money through ticket sales, merchandising, and donations. Good design makes for strong brands and it's good for the bottom line. People in the sports world are seeing a realization that design matters. From the initial conception of this project, there was discussion on how I could design and create content on a sports-related topic that would have an impact on people who aren't avid sports fans. The best example of a sports brand that can successfully grow and reach new target audiences is Nike and their strategy of demand creation. Demand creation is when Nike organically incorporates topics of genres outside of sports into their ad campaigns and products to reach a new audience. Without changing the core concept of their company, Nike has been able to expand into various forms of pop culture, ranging from rappers to children's TV shows. This has led them to possess the most amount of followers on social media platforms for a sports company. Here are the basic brand elements of the Iowa Wolves football team. You can see the full color, one color black and white logos, and the team colors and font. Other elements that remain consistent in the branding but are not listed are the textures in the background and the presets applied to the players' photos. This is a before and after look for the repurposing of the content from Iowa State Cyclones to the Iowa Wolves. For every photo and every cutout, I went into Photoshop to manually change the colors from cardinal to blue and removed any Iowa State branding. Next, I would retouch the photos in a consistent manner that would match the season's look. Next is the content created for the in-season branding. In-season content includes game day packages, score graphics, and various awards from activities during season play. This is where teams create and develop the recognizable system they work within during the team season. Something I incorporated into multiple graphics was the emphasis of depth of view. Having elements establish the foreground and background gave the graphics a more dynamic feel. To keep content consistent, I worked within a horizontal format for all game day deliverables. For content outside of game day graphics, I worked in a vertical format to keep a nice balance in compositions. In total, I created graphics for 4 games, 2 in the regular season, 1 playoff game, and 1 set of Super Bowl graphics. For the Super Bowl graphics, I slightly altered the look, which is common for teams to do in important games. Here are some motion graphics that will be a part of the game day packages. These would be played during the games on social media accounts to keep the fans engaged. Finally, we have a trio of engagement graphics. These graphics are where I practice Nike's demand creation strategy, which again is an attempt to organically incorporate other topics to broaden your target audience. This allowed me a medium to explore and try new things while still making progress in my capstone. This wraps up my capstone project. Thank you for watching.
All right, nice work, Jason. Good work, everybody. Okay, so if everybody would turn their cameras back on, we got some great comments and questions in the chat. And so, Bailey, I want to start with a comment for you that came from Emily Smith, which is a really smart idea to create conversation and attention around endangered species rather than just donating and crossing off a list or like checking a box. That seemed really important to your process and to your project early on. How did you decide that this needed to be much more about engagement as a design problem as opposed to just trying to get people to donate money?
Yeah, so this actually comes with part of like my double major. So as an advertising major a lot, we do advertising campaigns. So I feel like sometimes I always have like that campaign mindset in my head. So I always know that like engaging and like using guerrilla advertising is always going to help more than just being like, hey, here's the information, go do it. Because a call to action isn't always as helpful as like interacting with people and like leaving a lasting impression on somebody. You always want to make that emotional connection with people regardless of what it is. So that's how I decided to do this rather than just being like, hey, here's my advertisements, look at them.
Nice. Yeah. And it seems like you came up with a solution that really like comes to people or even offers up some serendipity in terms of like how people would find your experience and things like that. Nice job. Okay, next question is for Jesse. So this is from Stephen K. He said, first of all, how did you, sorry, wrong one. How did the process go with finding out how to produce the actual nail polish itself?
It was interesting. It was at first, I mean, it was fun, but it was like kind of a struggle at first because like you have to, you get, or at least the way I do it. So it's like this, like epoxy resin type gel that you mix with mica powder and then you dye the mica powder, or you can get mica powder that's pre-dyed, which is what I did. And so you have to mix them, but you have to mix them in a way where the kind of how the ratio of resin to powder dissolves enough, but not too much to where it's thin. So you have to like, I kept having to go back and forth for like, how much powder do I put into the resin and all of that in order, because sometimes I would make them and they would come out super chunky. You would get these like clumps of powder that would just spread across your nail and it would obviously not look the best. And then there were other times where you'd make it and you wouldn't even see any color. You'd have to like shine it up to a light and you'd get like a whatever, like an orange hue or whatever color that you're doing, but it would be this very, very, very light pigment. And now I figured it out as far as like mathematically and how much goes into what, or how much powder I need, how much dye I need for the size of bottle that I use. And so it definitely took a while. That definitely was most of the project, was trying to master that. But it was fun. It was super informative. I didn't think, when I went into the project, I didn't think that I would actually be able to do it. It was kind of just going to be more of a aspirational thing. But then it was actually, Alex, you right at the beginning, you were like, check out some of these websites. And sure enough, they had like all the materials that you needed, super easy to access. And so I did that, and I'm super happy I did, because now I mean, I'm wearing one of the colors now, but it's like a red. But they turned out great towards the end. So
Yeah, nice. And I think that process of making and learning the process of how that product comes together seemed really important and informative to the way that your overall project just sort of manifested into reality. And knowing that you've got like I think I saw you have an active Instagram account related to it already, and the promo video. Yeah, so that all came together really, really well.
yep.
Awesome. All right, cool. Thanks, Jesse. So, Jason, there's a comment in here talking about like the brilliance of seeing like social media as an avenue for athletic teams and sports franchises to engage with their dollars, basically, right? Like that quote seemed to summarize it really well, that it is about getting people to support these industries. So the question in the chat is, do you see this social media being a service provided, or do you see it a product that agencies adapt into their current processes?
It has definitely become an adaptation in that they do in the process. Something that I kind of left out in this presentation, but I had in my initial research, was the hierarchy of like big corporate like images that these teams have had is slowly being knocked down by how well these teams engage their fans in social media. For example, the first thing that everyone can kind of relate to is like Wendy's Twitter, when they started roasting people on Twitter, and it kind of was like the first big barrier of like a corporate company that's big as Wendy's, a fast food chain, just making fun of like their customers and stuff like that. And that garnished so much interactions and engagement with the Wendy's brand, and sports teams are just starting to do that now, to where that they will have memes conversation with their fans and their stuff like that. And just what Jackson said is, these teams and organizations are realizing the importance of a strong bond and a relatability factor of like 100-year-old football team or something like that. And so this connection that you can make fans excited for your team while also destroying that barrier of your corporate or something like that is what is driving this huge boost in like social media engagements.
Yeah, nice. And that just gets to the complexity of all the different ways messages can go forward. And as you mentioned in the presentation, the importance of them all presenting a single voice, all presenting a single, like visual message. So yeah, really, really nice. So Bailey, coming back around, to the collateral that comes in your boxes. This is one of the comments in the chat. What are some of the other things maybe moving forward that you would include, or are there sort of other opportunities for the branding to be a part of within that space, within the collateral of the boxes that you would distribute?
Yeah, I think some of the like stuff that you could put in the boxes necessarily like wouldn't need graphic design, like maybe like some stuffed animals and stuff like that, because people always will like buy it, support an animal, and then they'll give them a stuffed animal as a memory of it. Some like souvenir stuff like that, just to remember that you were there and stuff like that too. That might be some stuff that like you would put in there. Otherwise, like to explore more off of it, I definitely would want to like look into like garnishes, like making your own little garnish to put in it, like your own little umbrella, something like that. Thought about that too as well. Just like little like stress balls, t-shirts, stuff you could do to just make people remember, but not always just be the cliche stuff either. So yeah, I mean, it is a bar, so it's like shot glasses and stuff like that.
Sure. All of the solid mechanisms for that experience. But the other part of that I thought was really valuable was how you proposed the idea of the drink menu also being a recipe book. That seems to be like a really interesting avenue for potential, where somebody could experience it in the moment. They could have had a positive experience with maybe a drink from the book, learn about the recipe book, and then be able to make a donation. How did that come about?
Just making the recipe book.
Yeah. Like the recipes that you chose, and like you sort of aligned some of them with animals. What kind of what was sort of the experience of putting that together?
Yeah, so I'll nerd out a bit, but like a mojito has like mint leaves in it and stuff like that, and not cucumbers, limes. And so koalas eat eucalyptus leaves. So then I put the mojito with the koala to kind of like give the correlation there that like, oh, like it can kind of remind you of a koala bear. And then like the polar bear, I didn't even know this was a drink until I was like doing research. A blue Russian, so instead of a white Russian, it's blue curacao, heavy cream, and I think vodka. But yeah, it just looks like water with like an iceberg on top of it. So that'd be like a polar bear. So that's just kind of like things that I did with that. And you could definitely like brand things off of this, like I said, like the little garnishes, like you can make like the little animal like sitting in it, and that could be like their little habitat or something like that. One thing that'd be really fun to experiment with is physically making the drinks too, and like trying to experiment with like what you could do to make it look more like their habitat or something like that, which is kind of a weird experience. But no, I just went off on my bartending knowledge and thought of drinks that I've made of in the past, and just kind of like I knew the general ingredients, so I kind of knew like what direction to go in, but necessarily like yeah. And so the recipe book kind of just like a fun theme book instead, rather than having a boring like bar mixing book.
Yeah. Well, it's just that there's a level of intentionality
Yeah,
to
for
the
sure.
relationship that you're creating between like, oh, you came to a bar to have a drink from, a mixologist, and also here's something to learn along the way. And that idea of the field of drink making being up there at the same echelon as like chef or the construction of a valuable experience. I think that's all really meaningful. Yeah, nice. Thanks, Bailey. So Jesse, coming back to this idea of nail polish and your your project's mission to reduce any sort of like gendered stigma around nail polish. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced as you sort of started taking the full steps into that as part of your goal?
Well, I guess within like my like marketing and like the video itself, I guess like finding people from all like walks of life, I suppose, like finding guys that are comfortable with being like photographed this like a certain way, like with nail polish that might not otherwise be in the regular life, or like in the video, like finding people and not like obviously in the video it's me and basically my roommates who were the most accessible people at the time, but I'm not. The biggest challenge, which I hope to change in the future, was like including just representation across the board, whether that like race, gender, sexual orientation, whatever it is, which I didn't get to show necessarily in the project, but I do hope to show in the future of wherever I kind of take this.
One really direct question too, sort of along those lines. How did you decide to spell neutral the way that you did?
I was just kind of messing around with it, and I just like the way it looked. I just like the way it looked in compared to new, like the regular spelling. It just seemed a little too long for like a logo and like on a box, especially a small box. So I was like, how can I break this down a little bit? And that, I guess that was sort of the main reason, was like, how can I make it legible, kind of like you take a second glance when you look at it, because you're like, wait, what is that? And just how it was going to read on packaging, because like I knew the packaging was going to be such a big part of this, that I was like, okay, what can I do to it with the name to get that second look that's like, oh wait, hold on, what's that?
Yeah, nice. So Jason, sort of early-ish on in the process, I remember there was kind of a moment where you had gotten a couple of questions about people who were not like super passionate and even well informed about sports and sports culture. And you mentioned it a little bit in your presentation. But as you worked, knowing that sort of an audience is kind of on the fringe of who you normally work for, what were some of the biggest challenges related to that idea of making design decisions and putting together this very complete and very comprehensive package, but knowing that some of the people viewing it and experiencing it may not be diehard sports fans, but are at these sort of like different rings out of audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, something that I wanted to make sure that I addressed when I was creating this was fundamentally from a design standpoint, can the composition be solid? Like, am I relying too much on like the numbers or a statistic or a phrase of like what's going on or like the photo or anything like that? Is my design solid that can be looked at from anybody and just appreciate the work that was put into the composition? So that's what I wanted to focus on the most in terms of the game day packages, because the game day packages would probably be the thing that a non-avid sports fan wouldn't understand the most of, like, what is this stat? What does the stat line mean? Like, what do these words mean? Why am I doing this and that? And then another thing that I also wanted to focus on was what about my graphics were cohesive that people who don't watch sports can at least understand that's happening. And that was kind of my depth of view of those design aspects of how I was creating compositions that really focus on a foreground background and had a really engaging and moving kind of composition. And then finally, I tried to address that head on by with those demand creation graphics, or those are what I called engagement graphics, which most sports teams are actually starting to do now. So most sports teams will randomly, without any context, will post like a graphic where there's an illustration of their best player, and it's a crossover between like Star Wars, The Mandalorian is something that I've seen, or I've seen various anime crossovers, or various or even better, various advertisements where like this Dunkin' ad that I made where they will kind of find a twist. And those kind of compositions are things that people can at least appreciate when they see a connection between sports, something they don't know, and then something like Dunkin' Coffee. And so that was kind of my take on the addressing uh, the audience of people who might not be avid sports fans.
Nice. So finding a relationship between something else that they might be able to identify with, almost creating like a visual analogy, or yeah, I think that word crossover that lands really well. Nice work. So Bailey, there's a comment about the characteristics that you created for your letterhead for Endangered, and one of the things that I think works really well about that is the like the lines that you use to create the animal. Even as you mentioned in the presentation, it could be a lion, it could be a panther, it could be a number of things, because it's in some ways it's generalized enough. Maybe a biologist would be able to tell the difference, but in a lot of ways, like to a US audience, it definitely reads as exotic. How did you sort of move towards that as you kind of walked away from the first sort of pass of the colors and the shapes, as you moved away from the word void towards the word endangered?
Yeah, so I started with the word void, right? And then I didn't have anything like animal. I just had animal prints because I was trying to play around with an animal head, and I just like I don't want it to look too complicated, but at the same time, I didn't want it to look like a 5-year-old did it. So it was one of those things like you had to be intentional with what you traced, but at the same time, make it look like it's minimalistic, and that's always one of the hardest things for me to like grasp as a designer. But no, moving that way, I really just played around with the letter forms at first, like really just played around with the words. Like I went and wrote out a bunch of words, kind of played around with that. Then I figured out a few words I wanted, messed around with that some, messed around with like all the different ways you can put it, I guess is the best way to say it. Then I messed around with different shapes. And then once I got kind of like how I wanted that endangered word to look, I was like, this is too, this is it's endangered, yes, but at the same time, like somebody could read it because it doesn't have the vowels in it, and they could be like, "Well, what does this mean? Is it endangered? Or like, what is this supposed to be?" Like, you could not know what it is. So I was like, I have to put something to do with an animal on there. Like somebody suggested, like, make sure you know it's about an animal too. So then I just started tracing different animals and did the tiger, took away a few stripes, and then I was like, this kind of looks like a panther or a leopard or whatever you want it to be. So then that just kind of like incorporated it really well into it. And I feel like it can stand alone by itself very strong, but at the same time, it also stands alone together. It stands together very well because it's kind of peeking over, kind of like endangered, like, hello, help me. But yeah, so that's how I decided to go that route.
Nice. Yeah, I think those are all really good decisions, especially as you're building up the brand for what would be a relatively like enjoyable experience about something very serious, very pertinent. So along those lines of like branding elements, Jesse, you came to the photographs that you included on your website and you included on your poster as a way to really bring the visuals into part of the brand experience. Tell us a little bit more about how those photos came about, because they're really engaging, and in each photo seems to summarize your mission in a different way. And I think it'd be cool to hear a little bit more about how those came together.
Yeah, so like the idea behind all the photos initially was like, I want to photograph people in or like a stereotypical situation for what would be like the other gender, I suppose. Um, so like with the fighting one, for example, she's like wrapping her hand, she has the bloody and bruised hand, but you have the nail polish showing, so it's like stereotypically speaking, it's like I guess there would be more men in fighting, but it's like so you have this woman who's polished up with a bloody hand, like just finished her fight. So it's kind of like yeah, like breaking down those general stereotypes and
Oh, I think Jesse froze up for a second. Yes, because I see the other folks moving. So while we're waiting for Jesse to potentially unfreeze, or he may disappear and log back in, which I can let him in if that happens, no problem. Jason, similar question. How did you talked a little bit you spoke a little bit about how you manipulated the imagery, but even within that, there's a filtering process. There's a decision process for which type of imagery is going to sort of be the most on brand. What were some of the things that came about as part of your imaging selection process in order to maintain the brand of the fictional Iowa Wolves? It's an NFL team, right? So like the fictional like Iowa Wolves NFL team.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's something that made this entire process a lot easier for me was that since I work for Iowa State Athletics, I have access to all their amazing photographers and their photos and their photo shoots of the players. So, gathering the resources on a project this big was actually quite easy. So, I was able to cherry pick the kind of photos and the players that I wanted to use in terms of how they looked, like compositionally, like what kind of pose what they're using, what kind of like excitement, like static or active that they had. And especially for these game day graphics, which are supposed to bring like very like a lot of excitement to a team, like, hey, we're playing today, right? I took a lot of account onto what kind of player or what player I picked for that graphic and how they pose, how they fit compositionally to the graphic. And that's something that is a fundamental like decision that needs to be done correctly for these kind of graphics, for this excitement, just to kind of build um, hype and excitement for these teams, because there's a big difference between having someone statically like a mugshot on a game day graphic versus someone that's clearly like yelling or like very excited and very charged up. And so it's one of the many decisions that needs to be happen on these kinds of graphics.
Yeah, it's very true, especially when it comes to people. Like the smallest little change in a facial expression or body position communicates so much. So Jesse, back to you before you froze up. You were talking a little bit about the sort of intersection of putting people in different situations. If you want to kind of pick up where you left off, maybe. Nope. I won't take it personally. So with the last few minutes, we'll let Jesse finish answering the image question if he's able to get back in. But with the last few minutes, I wanted to go back around and oh wait, maybe Jesse's back. Is it working this time?
I don't know. So I don't know what just happened with my internet. Everything just crashed.
Yeah, I mean, 2020 became 2021. We're all doing our best. No problem at all. So we were talking a little bit about your images, Jesse. You were talking about the sort of intersection of people versus task versus like then wearing the nail polish. So I don't know if you know about where you fell off, but if you want to jump back into that answer.
Yeah. I think I was saying just kind of like using the photos to, I guess, fight like your gender stereotypes in a way, or just like make fun of them, or like kind of like bring light to them. I guess like it doesn't really matter. So it's like, because it's like the polish is for everyone. People who do, you know, because there are women fighters, there are, you know, women mechanics, there are women who chop wood. I know, like, it's like these simple things that you like assign like these gender types to, you know what I mean? But kind of just like getting rid of those just for the fun of it. And then you have the, I wish you could have like seen like the guy that we used for like the baking cake is, you know, he's like this big, like husky, burly man. It's like you place these people in these separate situations that I think when you see them, you're like, oh wait, like, oh, what's that? Um, and kind of breaking that down where it's like it doesn't really matter. It's just nail polish. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't matter what you do. It's just nail polish. Like it's for everyone.
Yeah, and I think when you were working on those images, the one that just really resonated with me, which you had in your presentation, was the one with the hand on the ratchet, like down in an engine. There was something about that image that just seemed to very precisely and sort of sort of energetically summarize what it was you were talking about. That it's color on nails. We all have nails. Why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't everyone be able to color them? Where does this sort of idea, this manufactured construct come from? So yeah, really nice. There's another comment showed up in the feed, which is for you, Bailey. It's from Michael Braley, and he said he agrees with you that one of the hardest things to do is to let yourself be confident in simplicity. So he's talking about your logo development and the branding that kind of comes with that. And then there's other positive words in there too about the recipe book. Somebody's interested in the idea of what the book could be, and if it, even thoughts on how it could be expanded. So with the last couple minutes, I want to go around and I'm going to ask you each, what was the biggest challenge that you faced during this project, and what was something that you are taking away that maybe you hadn't even necessarily expected coming into it? So Bailey, do you mind starting? Biggest challenge?
I feel like mine's more like technical and process. Biggest challenge for me was keeping track of all. File organization has always been a thing we talked about, but this like project, I really learned my file organization. I feel like I had a really good setup, so that helped me a lot, really well with that. And then another one that I learned, it was on the tip of my tongue. Oh, what was it? Oh, being able to step away from something. I know you've told us that many times before, being able to walk away from it. But like I can't tell you how many different recipe books I have. I think I have like 20, 25. I think I worked on that one till like the last minute, being like, okay, Bailey, this is the one you're going to do. Stop messing with it. So that was one thing I really learned from it is you're always going to find a way to improve it. So you have to be able to be okay with what you're going to do and just keep going with it, because it was hard to step away from one thing because I was like, well, I can do this. And then that's a whole different iteration from that. So yeah, being able to pick out which one's the best ones and working with InDesign was one thing I did a lot in this project. And I feel like I've mastered InDesign now. So yeah, that's a lot of things.
Nice. So both a technical one and a process oriented one. Great. How about you, Jesse?
I would have to say probably like the time management, like working with 16 weeks worth of time and like trying to break it up. And also like with mine, because I like kind of for a lot of it, especially like making the physical things, like I relied on like other people or like other companies that provide those services, like the packaging. It's like when I first like had them made, it was like kind of towards the end, and they said they weren't going to be here till May 8th, and I was like, oh shoot. I'm like, should have done that earlier. I mean, luckily I don't know what happened, but they got to me. But and it was like things like that, like the labels that I had made for the bottling. It was like they're like, oh, there's like a 2-week time where you might get them, and I was like, okay. And then so it's like trying to work around those things where I can still get stuff done and like keep progressing on other things while I'm waiting for those, but like trying to figure out how to manage all of that and still like make progress without being slowed down from other people's, their timelines versus my timeline or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. The professional production timelines and things like that definitely have an impact. And I think that, hopefully that's one thing that other people take away from watching your presentation is just how much of your project you did and are like working to put out into the world. And I think that's really exciting as you all are making this transition from like being a student to, in like 6 days, you're not students anymore. You're designers. And so this idea of transitioning some of these projects out into the world, I think is really exciting. How about you, Jason? What was one of your biggest challenges?
I would say the biggest challenge for me by far was removing myself from my like sports bubble and trying to objectively look at the content that I create from someone who wouldn't be a sports fan, because that's just who I am. I've grown up to be an avid sports fan, and I surround myself with peers, or I see inspiration shared online where it's content sports graphics and everyone knows what they're talking about and stuff like that. So when I design stuff and an element might not hit home to just a person who's observing it as a composition, I really need to consistently take myself out of my own mind and look at it from a technical aspect, or try and think like philosophically, like what could I do to um, broaden or at least reach a bigger target audience. Because at the end of the day, even though I am creating for a sports oriented audience, the goal is for growth and brand exposure and stuff like that. And so I think being able to objectively look at your designs or look at your process and stuff like that from a different perspective of someone who's not even sure what you're doing is a great way to grow as a designer. And I definitely took that as probably the hardest challenge of this project, but something that I would probably learn the most of.
Yeah, fantastic. That idea that you're not your audience can be really challenging to overcome. So I am glad to see that you took it on, and I was excited to see it as you did it throughout the semester. I know it was a big step, and it worked really well in the work. All right. So with the last minute or so, any of you have anything else? The three of you, do you have anything else you'd like to add, or anything else you want to say before we kind of wrap things up? All right. Awesome. So Bailey, Jesse, Jason, great work, great presentations. Thanks to everybody who's live, tuning in, asking questions, putting comments in. Bailey, Jesse, Jason, it was awesome working with you this semester. You should be really proud of your work. Your projects are amazing, and I honestly cannot wait to see what you all go off and do next. So there's another panel presentation that starts at 5 o'clock. So at 5 o'clock in 5 minutes. The link to that is in the comments for this stream that you're watching right now. So smash that link, and I will see you over there in a few minutes. Again, three of you, amazing work, great presentations, and I will see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.